This recipe is for my favorite sourdough sandwich bread. The texture is a lot like just a store-bought sandwich bread, but without all the yucky ingredients. And in this video, I'm making a double batch of the recipe. So when you see the recipe in the description of the video, it is half of what I'm telling you that I'm doing in this video. So I use 200 grams of active starter. I have used discard in the past, and it does work well with discard. I'm using 400 grams of purified water just straight from my Berkey. And then I'm using 40 grams of olive oil. This is organic olive oil. And I'm going to use 40 grams of local raw honey. There's only 2 more ingredients after this, but while I have my liquid ingredients, I like to whisk those together before I add my dry ingredients and before I put it on the KitchenAid mixer. You don't have to have a stand mixer for this recipe, but it sure does help because I like to knead mine on the mixer for about 10 minutes, and this just goes by a whole lot faster when you have a stand mixer. So here you'll see that I'm just using a metal whisk to get all of those liquid ingredients mixed together pretty well before I add the dry ingredients. So to the bowl, I'm going to add 800 grams of my all-purpose organic unbleached flour. I get mine at Costco in 10-pound bags. There's a 2-pack for $17.99, so that's about $1 a pound when you round up with the tax. And then I'm using 16 grams of sea salt. And then I'm just going to put this under the mixer and turn it on. And once it forms a soft dough and starts pulling away from the edges, as you see here, I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes and let it just run on like medium low. So this is after the 10 minutes, and I am pulling it from the bread hook. And I'm just going to shape it into kind of a ball of dough and put it back into the bowl and cover it with a damp linen towel. And I'm going to let it sit for 1 hour. I like to wet my towel with a warm water too, especially in the colder months. So it's been 1 hour, and I am going to stretch and fold this 4 times, and then I'm going to cover it again, and I'm going to let it sit for 1 more hour and let it rest. After the second hour, I'm going to stretch and fold it again. I usually get 4 stretch and folds done in one set. Now, if you're doing a single batch, your dough is going to be much smaller than this. I'm going to cover it. I'm going to let it sit for 1 more hour. So after that hour is done, I am scraping it out of the bowl and I'm putting it back on the digital scale because I want to see the total weight so I can divide it in half. This one was about 1,500 grams, and I'm dividing it into about 750 grams each. And then I'm just going to do a simple shape. Now, I've used several different loaf pans when I'm baking this bread. The glass Pyrex are my favorite. I've used cast iron. It tends to seep and cause like rust marks on the bottom of the loaf, even if I line the loaf pan with parchment paper. I've also tried using the silicone pans, and I really don't like the way they allow the bread to get out of shape when they're baking. So my preferred pan for this recipe is the glass. Now I'm just tucking this in, rolling it up, doing as tight as I can and getting out all the big air bubbles. And then I'm spraying my glass Pyrex pans with an avocado organic spray from Costco, and then I'm placing my bread dough in each container. Now you can use organic butter to line your pan too so the bread doesn't stick. And I'm using that same damp cloth over it to allow it to just rest on the countertop. Now, I actually let it rest for multiple hours. I'd say probably 4 or 5 hours. And I put the bread in the refrigerator overnight. So this is the next morning, and I'm just doing some short scores in the top of the bread, and I baked it at 375 degrees for 40 minutes. The last 15 minutes or so, I tint these loaves with aluminum foil because they will get too brown on top in my oven. So I like to do that. And then just go over it with butter and butter the tops. Now, with sandwich bread, I like a thin sliced sandwich bread. And the trick to slicing your bread is to have a good, sharp, serrated knife and to saw back and forth, just like if this was a log. Sawing it allows the serrations of the knife to go through the bread without you pressing down on the bread and flattening the loaf. And then just keep doing that and repeating it until you get to the end of the loaf. I did do both of these loaves. I sliced one to keep around for us to use this week, and then the other one I like to slice and put in a bag and then in a freezer bag, and then you can just pull out a couple of slices at a time if you need to make a sandwich from the frozen bread. So this is super soft. You're going to love the texture of it. Give it a try and let me know